This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from right across the continent. Quite a bit to get through, so let's start with a run through the markets. Now, until this week, South African equities were locking in week after week of consecutive gains, but not anymore. The top 40 closed about 0.57% lower. Glencore shares down by over 4%, following news that the firm is being probed by the CFTC over in the United States for possible corrupt practices. Mining stocks also have been falling for the third week in a row. All the indices we track here close a week lower, but the biggest losses of the lot were in Nigeria, down 1.15% this week. Here's what's coming up tonight. The United Nations is warning of an impending humanitarian fallout from Cyclone Kenneth in Mozambique. The taxi-hailing app Uber aims for an IPO valuation of as much as $90 billion. And a recycling South African designer unites talented locals through creativity. All that and more is in the pipeline for you tonight. But let's start in Mozambique, where the UN is warning of a humanitarian fallout due to Cyclone Kenneth. What you're about to look at is footage that has been uploaded on social media showing the destructive force of the storm that has killed at least 5 people so far and displaced at least 30,000 others. The high winds and the heavy rainfall brought storm surges and wind gusts of up to 280 kilometers an hour in the country. It was the most powerful storm on record to hit Mozambique's northern coastline. And remember, this comes just 6 weeks after Cyclone Idai battered this impoverished nation, killing more than 1,000 people, not just in Mozambique, but in Malawi and Zimbabwe as well.
Tropical Cyclone Kenneth made landfall in northern Mozambique near the border with Tanzania, in an area where no storm since the satellite era has ever been observed. So people in that region have never experienced a tropical cyclone, and they've certainly never experienced a tropical cyclone of that intensity. There's no record of 2 storms of such intensity striking Mozambique in the same season. Mozambique is obviously a developing country. This is, a major blow to its sustainable development.
All right, then, so let's get you the latest on Cyclone Kenneth. Daniel Kijo is covering events from Tanzania tonight. He's got the latest on this weather front. So, Daniel, at least 680,000 people were in the path of Cyclone Kenneth, well south of your position. But what's the latest damage assessment you're seeing from Mozambique?
Hello, Rama. Just as you touched on with that report from the UN, Cyclone Kenneth has left a terrible history for this part of East Africa, or East and Southern Africa. The winds went up to 200 kilometers per hour, and it has taken 5 lives across the region, destroying homes, knocking out power in parts of northern Mozambique. A lot of infrastructure has been destroyed, and now even Mozambique authorities are reporting that 90% of the homes on Ibo Island, which is in the northern part of Cabo Delgado, have been destroyed by the storm. So the Mozambique National Institute of Disaster Management has assured the public that food and relief equipment will be distributed, but it has left a lot of people within the region destroyed and even taken human lives.
Indeed, of course, a chilling part really about all the forecasts around Cyclone Kenneth is the fact that it's estimated to drop as much as 600 millimeters of rain in the next 10 days. And that's twice as much as Cyclone Idai. And that flood damage was absolutely extensive. What needs to be done to mitigate the damage that will come inevitably from the flooding from Cyclone Kenneth?
Aid agencies, yes, have raised concerns of the coming rains because of inland rivers leaving their banks. It will affect communities that are prone to flooding and landscapes. And the landfall the rainfall will reach about 600 milliliters, which is double the 10-day rains that caused a devastating, flooding during Cyclone Idai. So the Mozambique government and the World Food Program are working together on an emergency preparedness plan with other humanitarian groups. Now, the plan obviously will look at how to provide provide food, clean water, to provide essential medicines, and also be able to manage diseases that might happen due to the side effect, the outcomes of this cyclone. So it is a time of planning and calling out to all the neighbors to come and help.
Indeed. This, of course, is also the first time in recorded history, as I understand it, that two cyclones have slammed into Mozambique in the exact same season. Is this now the new norm, not just for Mozambique, but of course for countries in southeastern Africa as well? Because Tanzania could arguably be exposed to this kind of weather too.
Yes, Rama, this has been an interesting, unfortunately sad point of discussion because now climate experts are saying because of the climate change effects, there will be increasing ocean temperatures. Now, these are zones that are not used to having this kind of weather systems. But now as the oceans get warmer, they say that Mozambique, Tanzania, Comoro Islands, and this area in general is going to expect more cyclones and even stronger cyclones. Like you see, Cyclone Kenneth is breaking all sorts of, unfortunately, sad records, but now they're saying that because of climate change there will be increasing cyclones and they're going to be even have more destructive power. So governments around these regions, Mozambique, Tanzania, Comoro Islands, Madagascar, would have to come together and in the coming years and months make a plan of how to handle this perhaps going to be a bad recurring event in the region.
Indeed, of course, which leads me to my next question. If this is the new normal, is this a kind of risk that insurance companies at least can take on more or less at a national level? If, say, Tanzania, Comoros, Mauritius, etc., if they want to take out an insurance policy against this kind of thing, can that happen?
Well, this is following the recent floods that have left thousands of people homeless in a lot of parts of southern Africa, like you said, and also not just here, but due to climate change, many weather events across the world. Insurance experts are now starting to touch on the importance of having home insurance. They say people now would have to look at getting a standard home insurance policy that covers natural disasters. They have to be included in the policy because maybe some of the things that this insurance could cover would, in events like this, the insurance company could provide a temporary home when people are trying to rebuild and during the months after the devastation that cyclones and other weather systems cause.
Indeed, pretty sad events around that part of the continent. Daniel Kijo in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Thank you. Right then, the second Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation has officially started. President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech at the opening of this event. He stressed that the Belt and Road Initiative is an opportunity for common development, and he announced more ways in which China will continue to open up its markets. CGTN's Kue Shui Hao reports.
Shaping a brighter shared future. President Xi said over the past 5 years, the Belt and Road Initiative has made concrete progress on major projects, pushed the plans from blueprints into realities, and provided new opportunities and territories for both Chinese and world development.
From
Eurasian continent to Africa, the Americas, and Oceania, Belt and Road cooperation has opened up for global economic growth, produced new platforms for international trade and investment, and offered new ways for improving global economic governance. It helps improve people's livelihood of countries involved and has become an opportunity for common prosperity.
She said in the future, pushing for high-quality development of the initiative is essential, and he stressed the importance of green development and innovation in BRI projects.
China will continue to carry out Belt and Road Science, Technology, and Innovation Action Plan, and will work with our partners to pursue for major initiatives, namely the Science and Technology, People-to-People Exchange Initiative, the Joint Laboratory and the Science Park Initiative, and Technology Transfer Initiative.
President Xi also announced a number of new measures that will further open up China's market. These included allowing foreign capital into more sectors, better protecting intellectual property rights, and increasing imports of goods and services.
We will further lower tariffs and remove various non-tariff barriers. We will steadily open up the Chinese market and acquire high-quality products from all over the world.
As one of the most important diplomatic events hosted by China this year, the second Belt and Road Forum aims to bring about high-quality cooperation under the Belt and Road framework. These discussions are important as going forward, it is up to all participants to build a community of shared future and bring tangible benefits to local people. 崔慧傲 CGTN, Beijing.
Now, ahead of the second Belt and Road Forum, President Xi's and Premier Li's visits to Europe, continental Europe, earlier this year, saw a long list of results. That included Italy signing a memorandum of understanding to work with authorities in China under the Belt and Road Initiative. France also implemented related demonstration projects in third-party markets. But EU member states are expecting a bit more cooperation with China on this front. Earlier on, we spoke to our correspondent Stefan de Vries in Paris about these developments.
The Belt and Road Forum is already the third summit in a month where European and Chinese leaders meet. The succession of these high-level meetings is a sign that the two of the world's most powerful economic blocs are actively looking for a way to give their complicated relationship a new direction. Now the balance of global power is shifting. At least a dozen of the European Union member states see the BRI as an opportunity for investment and growth. The last ones to sign up were Portugal in January and Italy last month during the state visit of Xi Jinping. In the framework of China's 21st century maritime Silk Road, Italy represents one of the most important strategic players for China in Europe. The Chinese flagship project is the 5 Ports Initiative, involving ports around the Mediterranean coast in Italy, Slovenia and Croatia. Last month, France also warmed up to the BRI, but insisted that the initiative must work in both directions. Other European countries who are already amongst China's biggest trade partners, like Germany and the Netherlands, they have a more pragmatic approach to the Belt and Road Initiative. They consider the BRI as a way of increasing business with China and other Asian countries along the road. Although the Belt and Road Initiative has raised some questions and concerns in the European Union, Brussels now says that European companies would like to be more involved in the Belt and Road Initiative, but that Beijing needs to be more transparent about the project and about China's intentions. The Belt and Road Forum is a new step towards a mutually beneficial cooperation between Europe and China. I'm Stefan de Vries for CGTN in Paris.
All right, then a quick run through some company news. Let's start with a retailer in South Africa, Pick n Pay. It's reported an 18% increase in full-year earnings. The company also declared a total annual dividend of some 231 rand cents per share. That amounts to a total dividend payout of about $70 million. Now, the group's performance was anchored by a relatively strong result from its core division in South Africa. Nedbank Group has agreed to sponsor 3,000 young people between the ages of 18 and 29 for paid work experience in South Africa. The move is part of President Cyril Ramaphosa's youth employment scheme. It's aimed at reducing the country's current high youth unemployment rate. And shares of the Ukrainian iron ore producer Ferrexpo have plunged after the company's auditor, Deloitte, resigned amid a money laundering investigation at a charity that is sponsored by the company. Now, relations between the two have soured after Deloitte concluded this week that the funds to the charity might have been misappropriated. And finally, the American tech firm Amazon, or tech juggernaut if you prefer, plans to roll out free one-day shipping for all Prime members nationwide. The company is investing $800 million over the quarter in its fulfillment network as part of an evolution from 2-day standard shipping on many items to 1-day shipping. That's a run through your headlines. We're nearly 15 minutes into the hour. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. South Sudan is looking for foreign direct investment to revive its economy. And we'll explore how Tunisia plans to attract more than 100,000 tourists from China in the next 3 years.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
On May 8th, 27 million South Africans go to the polls. Africa's most industrialized nation is just emerging from recession and still faces enormous economic challenges. Join us on Global Business Africa for a week of in-depth coverage and analysis on the state of the country's economy. A different perspective of events shaping South Africa.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Now, as peace slowly returns to Africa's youngest country, the government in South Sudan is looking for a lot more FDI to flow in. President Salva Kiir was recently in the United Arab Emirates to try and woo investors from the Gulf state into the East African country. With the details, here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet.
South Sudan's government says it wants investment in infrastructure, energy and oil sectors. Juba says it has made a number of concessions to investors from the United Arab Emirates, including stopping double taxation and providing them with visas upon arrival in South Sudan.
A signal to the international community that we are ready to do business, that peace has come, and we are ready now to receive investments and to solicit external funds to help us with the developmental effort in the Republic of South Sudan.
South Sudan's government says it has secured a grant of $10 million from the UAE. Juba says the money would be used to support small and medium enterprises in South Sudan. Some investors in the country say the East African country still has an enormous need for support.
There are few banks. The population is lowly banked. There's a high need for financial inclusion. Most transactions are moving outside the financial ecosystem.
South Sudanese banks have stopped giving new loans during several years of conflict. Some people who were loaned money fled the country and have not made repayments. Many established businesses in South Sudan closed when war broke out in the country in 2013. A peace deal signed by former rival groups last year is currently at its infancy stage of implementation, and some analysts say serious investors may avoid South Sudan for now unless peace returns to the country. Patrick Koyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Cabinet ministers from Africa's youngest country have also met with investors in South Africa and business leaders as well at the Invest in South Sudan roadshow in Johannesburg. CGTN's Angelo Coppola was there.
The roadshow met potential investors in Washington, D.C., New York and Dubai before visiting Johannesburg. The continent's newest country has an abundance of oil and fertile arable land covering around 80% of its 800,000 square kilometers. And to sweeten the pot even more, the Investment Authority has a series of incentives in place.
South Sudan investment law is very generous when it comes to investors. We have, at times, we can even go as far as 5 years tax holidays. We've got concessions, we have got waivers, we have got special professional treatment that we can give to special strategic investing opportunities. So we have these, and they are there on the table. People choose what they want to go for.
The country produces around 300,000 barrels of crude oil every day. There's a challenge and an opportunity in that sector.
Midstream, that is where the problem lies, where there are no production facilities in South Sudan. Again, that is an opportunity. It's equivalent to around 15 million. If you refine these 300,000 barrels, it can produce about 15 million tons of products. And what is the East African requirement? It's even less than that.
The government is looking for investors to get involved in this opportunity, and it appears that they are flexible when it comes to establishing businesses locally.
An investor can choose to become a foreign company with no partners. They can choose to become partners with the local. But we sometimes prefer the biggest companies to be purely 100% a foreign company, so that it is their policies, it is their management, and then they know the risk.
As the delegation paint a rosy picture of the opportunities on offer, the situation in neighboring Khartoum remains volatile.
But if you take South Sudan and Sudan, they have been one country, the nation know themselves, but apart from that, the both countries depends on each other, on the economy, and also the 75% of oil that we used to have with Sudan is in South Sudan. Pipelines run to Sudan. So there is no way that they can have problem with South Sudan.
Like any newborn, the optimism is high that South Sudan is going to achieve its objectives and attract all that investment and grow its economy. Time will tell. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, the World Bank is urging economies across the continent to adopt a lot more digital services. That essentially means transforming their current government systems to be a lot more driven by tech. CGTN's Coletta Njohi caught up with the director of Central Africa at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa.
Well, there are changes in several fronts. First, there is the infrastructure that needs to be there. You need to have the broadbands. You need to have the companies that utilize the broadband to connect people. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect is to do with the legislation that is required to make sure that we are not victims of these societies. I'm talking about cyber security and every associated ills. But then we need to also deepen penetration and making sure that everyone on the continent has access to it. We don't want a digital divide.
A lot of business in the continent is done through the informal sector with little procedure, or we see some people moving stuff from one border to the other informally. How is the informal sector going to benefit from this digitalization?
Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, Ethiopia, there are so many cases there that young people and not only are already contributing solutions to our problems. Because the beauty of of the knowledge economy is that it's solution oriented. So that you can, in any particular country, village, you have a problem that requires a solution. So whoever comes up with a context-specific solution would have certainly a market. So it's about domesticating the technologies, is about understanding what the problem is and then offering adequate solutions.
Over time, we have seen some African countries feeling threatened by internet connectivity and shutting down internet until they feel it's okay to put it back on. With digitalization, which needs consistent internet connectivity, how are we going to survive, especially in building the economy with this?
Well, I think as we provide more evidence, and ECA is about evidence-based analysis, it will become obvious to everyone, including governments, that they gain most from embracing the network society. That the barriers to greater penetration, greater connectivity will only contribute to making them part of the periphery, to isolate them from the rest of the world. But as I said, this does not come without its own challenges. So those challenges need to be understood. We need to strengthen the regulatory bodies to make sure that we have adequate laws and regulations to address abuses. Service providers have to be part of the conversation.
Sierra Leone is nearing the end of a one-month ban on industrial fishing in its waters. Authorities in the country imposed that ban at the start of April as part of efforts to shore up fish stocks. Sierra Leone, like most other countries in West Africa, is facing an overfishing crisis. CGTN's Laura Olubengo has the details.
West African waters are home to marine lives of all kinds. However, it's not a safe haven for many. Sierra Leone, like any other country in the region, relies almost entirely on fish for its major source of protein. Yet fish has somewhat become expensive for most of its local population.
West Africa is the only region in the world where there is such a productive fishing zone which does not have a proper management of fisheries. Everyone knows what is going on. This is the only place where anyone can come and fish without being penalized. So we need a strong political will.
In Sierra Leone, foreign trawlers have reportedly been destroying what should be one of the richest marine ecosystems on Earth. Its government recently imposed a month-long ban, which started earlier this month. According to its Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Resources, the 30-day ban was designed to prevent a depletion of its fish stock. During this closure season period, only artisanal fisherfolks were allowed to fish on the country's waters.
It is a first step which we must salute and encourage. However, it is not enough because we know that the measures that underpin a biological resting period go way beyond a simple one-month halt of activities, and that these measures need to be based on biological rest, on the migration of the species, on fishing forts, etc.
Here is strictly for the IEZ. This is the breeding zone. We don't allow any vessel to go there. So when they stop those guys, they give us chance, because now if you want the catch, it's different from the time they fly out there. So now when they stop them, we have opportunity to access the fish.
But local fishermen working at Sierra Leone's largest fishing community don't have strong opinions of the ban's effectiveness. They say migratory behavior of certain fish species make it difficult to say if there are more or less of them now that the ban is wrapping up. Most, however, support the ban in theory, advocating for anything that could help regulate the trawlers that they feel act with impunity. Laura Olubengo, CGTN.
Now, Tunisia aims to attract over 100,000 100,000 Chinese tourists in the next 3 years. Authorities in the North African state are investing in a range of projects and campaigns as well, all of which are designed to attract Chinese visitors as part of efforts to promote the country's tourism sector. Here's CGTN's Adin Chouachi with more.
The Ministry of Tourism and Handicrafts is preparing a new project entitled Tunisia is Our Destination. The $70 million project aims to highlight a range of elements including the Carthage Museum and the craft sector.
This ambitious project is part of the alternative beach tourism, which brings together crafts, cultural tourism, culinary arts and sports. It will spread over 5 years from 2019.
The Ministry of Tourism is working on developing a strategy to promote and market the Tunisian destination in China.
Our goal is to increase the number of Chinese tourists and reach over 100,000 visitors from China. Visa exemption and several direct flights will help increase the flow of Chinese tourists who are welcome in all regions across Tunisia.
Professionals have welcomed the government initiative. Craftsmen in the old city of Tunis assert that Chinese visitors are interested in arts and craftsmanship.
Chinese tourists visit Tunisia to learn about its culture, civilization and traditions. Chinese tourists prefer centenary monuments to modern beach resorts. The increase in the number of Chinese guests will boost the revenues of thousands of craftsmen.
According to the Minister of Tourism, the number of tourists who had visited Tunisia during the first quarter of 2019 edged up 27% compared to the same period of 2018. In the meantime, the number of Chinese tourists has tripled.
Last week, a high-level Tunisian delegation took part in Beijing in the 15th edition of the China Outbound Tourism and Travel Market. Tunisian officials also attended the Shanghai World Travel Fair. Several agreements were inked between Tunisian and Chinese travel agencies and hotel representatives. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
It's about 18:30 GMT, time for another break. Here's what's coming up next. Well, we're going to the world of tech. Uber is aiming for a market valuation of $90 billion, but will it get it? And the closing chapter in the Avengers saga has hit Chinese cinemas. We'll be looking at that and a lot more when we come back.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Ucheoko reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
6 years on, what is the state of the Belt and Road? And how is the progress?
Where are the challenges? Who is building, connecting, and benefiting?
Our global correspondents bring you personal insights, live business reports.
Interviews with the major players, investigation and analysis.
For comprehensive coverage of the Belt and Road Forum, stay tuned to CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. So the ride-hailing giant Uber is looking to hit a $90 billion valuation at the very least in what is expected to be the year's largest single IPO, at least in the US. Now, the taxi app is expected to offer some 180 odd million shares valued at anywhere between $44 to $50 each. That essentially would put the company on track to make its debut in May at the New York Stock Exchange. But its valuation is lower than the $100 billion valuation it was expected to aim for. Uber currently offers ride-sharing services in some 700 cities around the world, but now it has bolder, grander ambitions to reshape how people and goods are transported with operations like meal deliveries through Uber Eats and Freight, Uber Freight, as well as electric bikes and scooters as well. Right then, quite a bit to get through on this particular subject. Leah Duncan has been following the market. She joins us now live from New York with the latest. So, Leah, what do investors make of this pricing range for Uber, $44 to $50? Is that just about right, or is the company being too conservative?
Well, they're certainly being conservative. Uber is aiming for a valuation of around $91 billion in its initial public offering. And that valuation is actually less than the $120 billion that investment bankers told the company they could fetch last year. And a lot of that, of course, has to do with the poor stock performance of smaller rival Lyft, which went public last month. As we know, Lyft priced at $72 per share. Today, that stock is trading around $56. But one thing to keep in mind here is that there is a possibility that Uber could raise that $44 to $50 price range if demand is strong, and it could, of course, price above its range. As we saw in the case of Pinterest, it priced at that $15 to $17, and it's now trading around $29. So there's certainly the possibility that the price range could just really be a starting point here, but certainly Uber being conservative.
Right, so as you mentioned, the spectre of Lyft essentially haunting Uber here, down about 20% since they floated. But what didn't the market like about Lyft, about the company or the pricing of its shares in the IPO?
Right. Well, Lyft was, the first of the so-called tech unicorn IPOs to hit the market this year, and they certainly wanting to have that first movers advantage over Uber. But it seems that the thinking is that Lyft really pushed the limits on price. Lyft completed its IPO at a valuation of just over $24 billion, which corresponded to around 11 times its revenue in 2018. By comparison, the top end of Uber's valuation target is around 8 times its revenue last year, just to give you a sense there. Now, one analyst from PitchBook Data actually believes that the recent price reductions for both Uber and Lyft may also be indicative of investor hesitance to invest at this late stage of the economic cycle. He believes that companies like these have not been tested during a downturn, and a true test for the market will be how these companies respond whenever the cycle does roll over. Other thoughts here are the fact that Lyft is the number 2 player in the space behind Uber, of course, and the fact as well that there is really no clear path to profitability.
Indeed. So that actually brings me to my next question, because there's been this wave of tech-focused IPOs so far in the year. You've got Zoom coming to market, Lyft, Pinterest, Uber coming to market next week. And a lot of these companies aren't making any money, and they're just wholly focused on growth, and nothing else. So what's the investment case here really for Uber? Because it had an operating loss last year of $3 billion, and the year before that, it lost $4 billion.
Well, that's right. These IPOs have really presented a predicament for investors. And while they don't feel like they want to miss out on the next big thing, so to speak, they also have to weigh these risks of businesses with these unproven economics, like the Lyfts and the Ubers, etc. And Uber is gearing up to kick off its investor roadshow, and management will spend the coming days pitching the company to public market investors. According to Reuters sources, Uber is expecting to price that IPO on May 9th and then begin trading on the New York Stock Exchange the following day. Now, one advantage Uber will likely try to play up here to investors is that it is the largest player in many of the markets in which it operates, and the fact that it operates around the world. Lyft, on the other hand, only operates in the United States and Canada. And the company will also try to sell the fact that it is much more of a logistics company versus just being a ride-hailing company like Lyft. And in addition to questions about when it might be profitable, investors will likely also want to know about how Uber plans to navigate the transition to self-driving cars, and also whether its business model can support higher driver costs from minimum wage rules. Now, building scale is also another key point, and analysts really view that as crucial for Uber's business model in order for it to really become profitable. So it certainly looks like the coming days will be very, very busy for Uber's management. And this Uber IPO would rank it as the largest in the United States since that of Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba Group. That was back in 2014.
Indeed. We'll leave it there and see how this plays out. Leah Duncan in New York. Thank you very much. Now, Swedish cars made in Belgium can now soon get to China through a Chinese railway line. The new process is said to be a lot faster, a lot safer, and apparently more environmentally friendly. CGTN's Mariam Zaidi explains.
Volvo, a car synonymous with reliability. In 2018, global sales reached 600,000 cars, and 3 of its best-selling models, the XC40, the V40 and the V60, are all made under this roof. The factory in Ghent is one of Volvo's main production plants in Europe. Here, around 5,000 people are employed, and they say that they can roll out 1 car per minute.
Car come here, where they adjust the lights and the wheel adjustments. We're going better and better.
China is a growing market for the Swedish automaker. 4% of the 2,000 cars produced in Ghent are earmarked for China. They leave the factory here for Zeebrugge to be transported and taken by sea to the Chinese mainland. But plans are now underway to increase both the export and import of cars and car parts from Europe to China and vice versa by train via a new China Railway Express.
The main thing to mention here is that it's important that we can add that kind of export mean to our regular export means by boat, because it's more ecological, it goes faster, and it's really more efficient for the plant.
A modest test of the new freight service saw 160 cars loaded onto a train close to Volvo's HQ in Ghent in June last year. 16 days and 10,000 kilometers later, they arrived safe and sound in Shanxi province. Volvo say they expect the railway to be ready for action by the summer. Mariam Zaidi, CGTN, Ghent.
Now, unless you've been living in a rock, or you've been swallowed by a black hole, or you've been watching Game of Thrones, which is all entirely understandable, the Avengers are back, right? The Marvel comic superhero franchise, the final chapter of it, hit Chinese cinemas, and it became an absolute smash hit, along with record high pre-sales. This film is expected to become Hollywood's biggest earner in China ever. It debuted in China 2 days earlier than in North America.
Realized I loved you.
For Chinese moviegoers, Avengers Endgame was one of the most highly anticipated films this year, and viewers rushed to cinemas as soon as the film was released Wednesday morning, eager to see how the superheroes who survived in Avengers Infinity War are now going to save the universe.
All we can do is our best.
Box office sales in China for this midnight release reached about 179 million yuan, or nearly $27 million, with more than 3 million moviegoers attending this premiere. According to the latest figure online, the film's Wednesday premiere set a single-day pre-sales record, reaching about 232 million yuan, or nearly $35 million.
I'm here because of Robert Downey Jr. The Iron Man series have ended, so I have to see Downey in the Avengers films.
We are traveling to Shanghai, but we want to watch this film before we go home. We are really looking forward to it.
The film has a positive preview. I think Endgame is the best in the Avengers franchise.
Overall, Avengers Endgame also shattered pre-sales record for the Chinese film market, with $90 million in early ticket sales. This was well above pre-sales for Avengers Infinity War, which came in at $59 million. And it also surpassed the previous record holder, Monster Hunt 2, which made almost $60 million. According to The Hollywood Reporter, after Endgame's record-breaking midnight release, it could rake in as much as $270 million more during its 5-day debut, and perhaps overall earn around $450 million by the time it leaves Chinese theaters. Michael Jordan, CGTN.
Now, podcasts have been around for years, and they were taken over by new audio apps one by one. But now in the United States and quite a few other markets too, podcasts are seeming to have a second round of popularity. What's happening? CGTN's Phil Lavelle finds out.
Listen up, because more and more of us are. 1 in 3 in the US now tuning into podcasts every month, say researchers.
I think that we are reaching an inflection point.
Perhaps that's why the industry is getting pumped with cash. Spotify leading the way, up to $500 million just spent on leading podcast producers. This streaming music company now looking beyond the music.
Spotify published a blog saying we're not only a music company, we're now an audio company.
Buoyed on by the numbers, maybe. Listener figures expected to grow dramatically over the coming years, up from 287 million in 2016 to 1.85 billion in 2023. Google launching its own service last year, and the BBC now making it a major focus of its offerings too.
The thing is, the podcast is not some kind of new invention. It's actually been around for the best part of 15 years. In fact, the name podcast comes from the word iPod, and you don't need me to tell you what one of those is. But even though the podcast has been around for years, it seems 2019 is its time.
I think a podcast gives you sort of a raw, oftentimes unfiltered access to information.
Perhaps that's why, in a world of divided politics and all those allegations of fake news, it is a way of tuning out the noise and hearing what it is you want to hear.
I think people gravitate toward that sort of intimate experience. It's like a book. Like you can pick out any one that pertains to you. It's not like there's a couple of news channels out there and you get your information that way. And so it's a really kind of like a choose your own adventure.
The big challenge for the industry is how do you make money from podcasts? See, by nature, these things can be made by anybody. All you need is a microphone, a pair of headphones, and an internet connection, and you're a publisher. You are online. And that's typically not the kind of stuff that people are going to want to pay for. How is the money made? Because podcasts are free, right?
Yes, the vast majority comes from advertising. That for us, that's over 80% of our revenue. But there's a growing revenue model by us and other companies that comes from turning our shows into televisions.
And those are shows like Homecoming, Julia Roberts' Amazon series, which came from a podcast, and Dirty John, more than 50 million downloads, accompanied by a TV show.
I'm John.
Big producers like Wondery here in Los Angeles, pumping out podcast hit after podcast hit in partnership with TV studios.
If you think about television, for decades, there was only free television. Then cable television came into existence. Same with digital news. Most people thought that digital news were supposed to be free until organizations like New York Times, Wall Street Journal started to implement paywalls. The same thing, I think, will happen with podcasting.
And so this medium has its day, its play. All eyes and ears on the podcast as it finally comes of age. Phil Lavelle, CGTN, Los Angeles.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices. We're going to talk about oil and coffee. So let's start with Brent crude. It's not having the best of sessions, frankly, down by at least 3.25% by 15:44 GMT. 71.93 is the price at that point in time. At those levels, it's wiped out all the gains made this week. Coffee, on the other hand, what really is there to say about this? It's paused the decline, but only just. Futures for July trading at about $93.80 at 15:47 GMT. But remember, this is a commodity that's fallen by over 12% this year alone. In the last 5 years, it's fallen by over 42%. Here's what's coming up next. A recycling South African designer unites talented locals through creativity. And preparations for the Holy Month are in full swing over in Egypt.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. A local artist with a gift for turning trash into art is bringing creative South Africans together from across the country. At a workshop in Cape Town, Heath Nash and artisans are combining to create unique pieces of art out of discarded materials. Here's CGTN's Julie Shai with that story on Grassroots tonight.
The saying one man's trash is another man's treasure is certainly true for Heath Nash and these talented artists.
There's a huge need to do away with waste, and there's also a huge need for people to power themselves and step up into a more 21st century world. So the longer term plan and the dream is that our workshop can become something that can travel and can become a way for many people to pick themselves up.
For many, being creative comes naturally, but the opportunity to turn their craft into a profession isn't as accessible. Designer Heath Nash is lending a hand and giving these artisans a chance to sell their products and become self-employed.
What we're trying to do in Langa is run a pilot to see how to makerspace that can be most well used by the local community. Unfortunately, kids aren't taught these basic craft skills anymore. Especially in the townships, there's very little creative education at schools. So the space at our workshop is supposed to eventually allow for new generations of young black artists to kind of emerge.
Since 2016, our workshop has created livelihoods to people who have been struggling to find work.
One of my important thing is to have a job, because I don't have a job. I'm not employed, I'm unemployed, I'm depending on what I've sold here at our workshop. Got children, for instance, I'm still having a child who's still at school, so I've managed to pay a lot through the products that I'm selling here at our workshop.
Our workshop makes my life better now, because since I was with our workshop, things is very cool now. I pay rent, I pay school fees for my kids, I make the sales, I make the small things. Very good now.
Business at our workshop is not quite booming, but artists here are turning trash into income and managing to get by. Julie Shah, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Now, the Muslim holy month of Ramadan starts on the 6th of May and it runs for an entire month. During Ramadan, Muslims are required to fast and abstain from food and drinks from sunrise to sunset. They're also required to increase their prayers. Egyptians receive the month in a pretty celebratory mood and special preparations are already underway. CGTN's Yasser Kim has the details.
It's that time of year again. The holy month where all Muslims fast during the day and spend most of the month in prayers. But in Egypt it takes a more festive mood, with the famous Ramadan lanterns the first item on the bucket list.
We came here to buy the lanterns. It's essential to have it at home. We enjoy the celebrations and lanterns ourselves, not just our children.
Every year lanterns come in different shapes and colors.
I prefer the large metal one with golden stripes. It's more expensive but colorful, and we like it at home.
Ramadan is not just about festivities, decorations and prayers, but another aspect is food. After breaking their fast, Egyptians enjoy the special Ramadan snacks. The ever-popular Ramadan nuts and sweets called yamish are on display with higher sales during this month.
We bring it from Aswan in Upper Egypt. All the types of sweets, nuts, dates and juices are made especially for Ramadan. We bring it to Cairo and set up here because demand during Ramadan is high.
The prices of food naturally goes up during the Ramadan season.
The prices are higher than the rest of the year, but it's alright. We buy it once a year. In this market they have discounts. Prices here are better than outside.
But regardless of prices, Egyptians have already shown willingness. They will be enjoying the upcoming holy month. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
All right then, let's wrap up the program, shall we? The quick run through the currencies here for you. So, for those of you who are adventurous and want to chase yields on the frontier, look to Ghana next week. They're going to be reopening a January 2025 6-year SETI-denominated bond. Why is that of interest? Coupon rate is 21% on that particular issuance. Expect price guidance sometime next week on the 30th of April. The Rand, of course, is the worst performer among the lot we have here. It eased by almost 2% this week, started at about 14.0486, closed at about 14.3032 at 15.53 GMT today. Here's what's essentially making up our currencies for you tonight. That's it for tonight's edition program of Global Business Africa. Plenty of content in the last 60 minutes. We'd like to hear your feedback on what exactly you saw here in the last 60 minutes. Plenty of ways to get your feedback to us, all of them on your screens right now. Right then, thank you very much for your company. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C. I'm Ramah Nyang.